Welcome back to the lab. If I look hot, it's quite muggy. And also, yeah, there's issues. You guys know this beast. Remember we had a VK45DE, a direct injection motor engine. Some people get cranky about you calling it a motor, but it's a motor vehicle, so it's a motor or an engine. Let's not argue about it. We had a VK45DE in there. I took that out and I put in a junkyard parts VK45DE, which is going fine. I'm not going to say it's mint. It's good. It's probably better than a lot of cars that are cruising around on the road. It does do a weird thing when it gets just to a certain temperature. When you're cruising at 110 on the expressway, it drops a cylinder while you're cruising. As soon as you change the throttle position, it comes back. Bit of a weird one. I've had a look around at a few things, haven't found it. Not too fussed about it. It's not a massive big deal. The big deal today involves the bottom of the engine. That there being a VK46DE Sump that I was just looking at to see if it'll go on a VK45 without a tremendous amount of fiddling and tomfoolery. It's not that bad. If you really wanted to, you could. Lines up, lines up, lines up, lines up. Not off to a terrible start. Doesn't. As you can see, there's a bolt hole there and there's a funny shape on the 45 that isn't on the 56. Doesn't, but you could do a little bit of a weld out the side there and slot that and make that work. Won't be much purchase to seal here. Doesn't, but the hole's just there. You could again do a little bit of a welding around this general area and drill a new hole. You'd make that work. Rubbish. Actually perfect. I just bumped the sump just before, but that one and that one, they work. And the oil intake for the oil pump, which is on the end of there, that'll work with a little bit of tomfoolery. This one, pretty much just drill the hole out to a millimeter bigger and that'll work. That one, you probably just slot the hole that way, a little bit of tomfoolery, maybe a cap screw in there instead of a standard bolt, and that'll work. That one's rubbish. And that one, again, a little bit of welding and shift the hole and you get away with it. And then you'll be almost bolting a VK45 engine to a VK46DE Sump, which will work really well in a D40 Navara chassis if you haven't put the engine too far back in the chassis like what I did. So I just had a look at what will happen underneath. We'll lift it up in a minute, and it's not going to work out terribly well with this rear sump bowl is. If we put a flat plate on here, or relatively flat, that'll work. That's kind of an option. There's a few things that have to happen. Air conditioning pump mounts are perfect, but like I say, these other bolts are not, and there's a bit of a change in shape that has to happen underneath where the oil filter would go. The oil filter might actually hit on there's a cross member that's right under the front of the motor. It might hit there, and we have to put some 3 bosses on the side here for our power steering pump, and we also need a bracket in this general area to attach our power steering belt tensioner. Unless we just stretched a belt around the 2 pulleys and didn't worry about a tensioner, you could probably do that quite fine. The reason why I'm looking at all this, talking about all this crap, is my sump under there is leaking. It's leaking quite a lot. It's making a bit of a mess. I don't like leaks. And you're not allowed to have them for a warrant of fitness. And at some point, this is broken. This is our remote oil filter mount. It's snapped off, so I've cable tied that to hold that in the short term. But up here, in there somewhere, where you can't really see while it's in the vehicle and you can't easily access it, it's leaky, and it's getting worse. There's some sort of a crack or something going on up there, or a busted O-ring, or I don't think it's these fittings because I've tried to tighten those and you can't really get any swing on them. Something up there is leaking, and this thing is a bit of a pig. It's a bit of a mess. fiddled around with it back in the day when I built the whole ute to get this whole conglomeration sitting in here where it is, and it's not ideal. I can do much better today. The problem is I can't get a VK45DE Sump. They're just rocking horse crap. Very hard to get your hands on. So I'm gonna have to take this out, take the front cover off the motor, and see what's going on, what's cracked, what's gone wrong, make up my mind whether I'm going to do this and put that in there or fix this mess. I've got the spare block there to use that as a jig to bolt all this up and hold it nice and square while we fiddle around with it and chop and change things if we need to. So I really don't have time for this. I'm supposed to be doing our little Lotus 7 project there. Sorry if I'm making a C6 swinging the camera around everywhere, but look, I've got to get on with it and fix it to get a warrant of fitness so that we can tow the March to Taupo for this super lap in January. Right, let's pull it to bits. Couple of things out of the way in the front here where I suspected the worst leak would be. It's not really. I can't see a massive issue here. It's here somewhere. But like I say, it's tucked away. You can actually see a lot better with the mirror, rather with the cell phone than I can with the mirror. Somewhere, maybe it's that area there, but there's a lot more oil backwards from here than what there is in this general area. So, interesting. Looks like something's coming from up there, doesn't it? Dipstick tube, perhaps? Lunchtime already, dang. Day's going fast. Okay, so we've got bolts missing, big bolts. Had to take sway bar out. Sway bar's just held up temporarily. I'm hoping we're not going to get one of these drips on my cell phone up there. Can I get the right angle? Not really. Up there, beside that bolt that you can see behind the power steering rack mount, oh, you can see it there, there's a crack. Big crack in the casting. So when you muck around, Alan Woody from the Skid Factory will tell you, when you muck around with cast aluminium sumps and try and weld them and make them into things that they're not supposed to be, it's not ideal. You can get away with it and you can have problems. So first of all, it's full of a lot of silicon, makes it hard to weld without getting porous welds. Second of all, it tends to distort, and despite trying to machine it and get it right, you get a couple of heat cycles through it and things will move again, put stuff under load, and then they crack. And obviously that's cracked somewhere where there's quite a lot of pressure on the oil and she's coming out. So I'll carry on. Unfortunately, I've put this nice big brace in the chassis here, so I've got to take this out to get that off. This is attached to that, so I'm going to take that out to get this out to get that off. But that's attached to that, so I've got to hold that up, take this off to get that off, to get that off. But when you hold this up, it's inside the cross. That's all a bit. Let's see if I can come up with a better plan. Conjure up some hack to get this part here in and out easier. Right, so I took the entire engine out. I'm just joking, that's the old motor. This is actually the old motor, that's the VK45DE. And then this is a piece of one of the junk motors that I built a motor from. Engine, whatever. Found the problem. My bad. The big gap under there. There's actually supposed to be a little gap there at that point, but not back here. Not where there's this bolt that goes through. And if you tighten that bolt up, so actually in the thickest part, where you wouldn't expect it to move a lot because I've chopped and changed things, fiddled, it has distorted a lot. It's not actually the sump that's the problem. It has cracked. We might be able to see it. The lighting's not that great.
it has cracked that piece up there, just where the dipstick comes through there and pokes down into oblivion. You can see there's a crack there. So that's where all the problem's been coming from, and that's actually a high pressure oil gallery heading up there, so it's possibly got a little kink in the side of that, a little crack, and that's where our oil leak's coming from. My oil leak, my problem, my fault, my bad. No dodging that one. So there's where the dipstick goes through. Here's our high pressure oil feed to the centre of the motor. Does everything, this one. All the things. So we've cracked it just in here somewhere. Good chance it's got a tiny little hairline into this doofer. So, I mean, obviously, here's one. I've got another one. We can put that on. Big job, but it's got to be fixed. We can't put that sump back on, because we'll crack this one too. I can't get another sump. So, a couple of options. Fix that sump. Fiddle around with a VK56 sump. Try and make that work. Or, where is it? There's some material there to start making the perimeter and build a scratch built sump. Start from nothing. That might be the way to do it, because this one only kind of sort of just fits. So let's have a think. Cold drink, have a look. Wow. This is an all day, well, it was Nissan all day actually. Pretty big day. So new front cover is on. Nothing fantastic about it. Looks pretty much the same as the old front cover. There's a little bit of excessive sealant to get rid of if we're fussy. We're not going to be. It's a workhorse. It just needs to go and not have issues. So that side of it's all done. We don't have it's way down there, you can't see it, a crack down there beside the dipstick tube anymore. That there sump there, that's the old cover on there, has been fiddled with. We do have a new one coming, second handy from Hartley Engines and Motorsport. It'll be probably on its way tomorrow morning, but it's quite urgent to get this back together so I can get on with everything else. I've repaired. You can't really weld this stuff very easily. It's full of magnesium or something. It's muck metal, they call it, so this doesn't weld very well. I've repaired that. That broke because sometime ages ago when the engine was out for something, I can't remember, it was on the floor while I was doing something else and still had the filter on, and it broke that bracket. I could grind it all off and put another one on, or just grind it off and run longer hoses and relocate the filter somewhere else. I probably will do one day, but in the meantime that's fixed. I've rectified the issue with the gap that was under this bolt head here. That was actually the root cause of the problem. There was clearance there. I've since smashed that properly, and it's tried to pull this up rather than clamp it flush with everything. Actually, my finger's catching on that right now because it's sitting proud the whole way around. We're sitting on these faces here, not here, and on these surfaces here, and that had some clearance, and of course you do the bolt up and just tink, cracked, and that's where our leak was coming from. Pretty small issue. If I'd known exactly what it was very, very hard to see. I perhaps would have cleaned this whole area up around here and just pumped sealant in it and let it set. It probably would have fixed it. Never mind, I've done it the hard way, and the hard way involved making a linishing table, I guess you'd call it. Oh, we'll throw this over here. It looks a little bit yucky, but I've started about here somewhere. Built this up with weld all the way around here so that we have everything at the correct clearances. there's some, it's not ideal having those holes there. I may close that off tomorrow. It's supposed to look more like that, what the factory has done. So that'll work for now. The biggest P in the A with this is that the dips, the oil pickup tube, it's quite a big conglomeration like that. You can't get the sump on the engine with the engine in the car with the dipstick, with the oil pickup tube, and you kind of have to wriggle your way around and get the bolts in there and then put the sealant on the rest of the sump and jam it up in the hole. It's far too big a job to try and lift the engine up. There's no room between the gearbox and the tunnel, so you can't pick the engine up. Alternatively, support the engine and literally lift the whole body, but that's too hard. So we'll just do what I just said just before. I'll do that tomorrow and she'll be good. It'll be fixed. My clock's lying again. It literally stopped yesterday and then it started up again at some time. It's actually like 5:45, so it's time to go inside. Alright, we've run out of day. It's Wednesday. Run out of day, but we're done. It's assembled. There's an oil cap to take off, some oil on the bench to put in there. The silicone I've used to put the sump on, called 3-bond, it's really good. I like 3-bond. Takes 24 hours to cure, so I don't want to rush things and put the oil in it and cause a leak. So we'll do that tomorrow morning, about 10 o'clock. Bang the battery terminal back on there. I should be good to go, hopefully. Hopefully I've not introduced any other problems to it, but that should sort it out. My bad. I gave some things a polish, so there you go. It's a bit shinier. Other than that, everything's same. Put it back together exactly the same, except fixed. We do have possibly another sump coming. This one will be fine in the meantime. But looking at this, if I can get some accessories, borrow some from Nissan King for over the Christmas period perhaps, mount the alternator and a power steering pump there. I might see how far I can sneak the power steering pump that way. This is upside down obviously, so that's up in the vehicle, and then make the sump lower profile. We might be able to get a slightly better angle on the engine. It's not terrible, but it is a little bit nose high. I could measure it, figure it out. It's probably 7 degrees, I'm going to guess at, something like that. I will measure it, have a look and see what it is actually, just out of interest. It's relatively square in the vehicle, but just down that way. Not a big problem. Right, cool. And then I've got to get on with, we can't see it. Oh yeah, we can. Got to get on with that Lotus. And then there's something that needs to be done on the March. And then there's a whole heap that needs to be done on the Bedford. And busy. Right, thanks for watching. Better go. Cheers, bye.